Hey, welcome back to another edition of Everything Football 62. I'm your host, John, the Big Tex Johnson, a.k.a. Uncle Tex, a.k.a. Professor Tex. Like and subscribe to the channel. Got any questions, comments, concerns, also share with a friend. Let me know down in the comment section and we can talk about it. It's crazy. I was doing some stuff, I saw that where Otis Taylor passed away, great wide receiver for the Kansas City Chiefs, where he passed away. And I got to looking at some stuff, just stats and things of that nature. And Otis Taylor was a beast. I'm gonna get to that a little bit later, but he was 6'3", 215, I believe. He was his game was much like T.O. before T.O. if you want to take a look at it and whatnot. But one of the things I want to talk about that's not really discussed, I think, a lot is the fact that Kansas City's defense was sick. And I don't think anybody really realized how good these guys was. You're talking about from 66 to about 70, 71, exception to maybe 1 year, I believe. Those guys was top 5 defense every year. A few times they were number 1. About 3 times they were like number 1 in defense and whatnot. And this goes in accordance with that of Bobby Bell, the outside linebacker / defensive end. He might have been the edge rusher, whatever you want to call him. But he was an outside linebacker. First outside linebacker inducted in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Actually, if you want to get right down to it. But what's not really spoken about these guys is that the defense that they were on in the 69 season, 69 going into 70, when they won the Super Bowl against that of the Minnesota Vikings, these guys were just like ridiculous. That whole defense, you had 6 Hall of Famers. It's 6 Hall of Famers from that particular defense on that team that played that particular day. And we start off with Bobby Bell. I've talked to you guys about Bobby Bell before. Bobby Bell was that dude. He was that dude. Hank Stram said he was like the only player that probably could play every position on the field and whatnot. Then we go over, with Bobby Bell, and he was something. You go back and check that 100th year, you can go 100th year anniversary, or the top 100 players back when NFL Network actually did a piece about these guys doing the things that they did and whatnot. And he was one of the top players there. We go to Willie Lanier, the first black middle linebacker inducted in the Hall of Fame as well. But he was the first outside middle linebacker and whatnot with Willie Lanier and whatnot. You go to that of Curley Culp. And Curley Culp was that nose guard. He really made that position a mainstay in that of football and whatnot. You go to Buchanon and whatnot. Go to him. And, one of the best defensive tackles in the game. If you go to Emmitt Thomas and whatnot, with Emmitt Thomas, one of the better safeties in football, one of the better defensive backs. And then recently you had Johnny Rodgers. I think it was Johnny Robinson and whatnot. All these guys were all pros, and all these guys was perennial Pro Bowlers in their prime. And I don't think enough is spoken about. We talk about the Steel Curtain. We talk about that of the Purple People Eaters. We talk about the Fierce Enforcer. We talk about the defensive front and whatnot. And not a lot, to me, is talked about when it comes to Buck Buchanan and Curley Culp. Them guys holding it down in that of the defensive line department and whatnot. And enough is not really talked about these guys in that defense. They're not really mentioned that much. Like you mentioned, the Steel Curtain, the Purple People Eaters, the Fearsome Foursome, and whatnot. And so not so much the line, but the defense. Chicago Bears, Doomsday Defense, because they didn't have this name and all this kind of stuff like that to come along with them. And and whatnot. And if you go back to the 62 year, back in 62, back when they were still the Dallas Texans, it actually won the AFL championship. These guys was like that. And I'm not really sure, but I'm gonna take a wild guess. If you look at what goes on here, you're talking about 6 Hall of Famers. If you're talking about 2 on the defensive line, 2 players on the defensive line, 2 players at the linebacker position, and 2 players in the secondary. I mean, dude, like, what else do you want? You know what I'm saying? I mean, it's crazy because if we go back to that of Emmitt Thomas, 5-time Pro Bowler, 1-time All-Pro first team. I don't know how many times he made second team All-Pro, but that really isn't that important. But at the same time, on top 5 defenses, every freaking year these guys touch the field. And they're not really spoken about that much at all. Matter of fact, they're not spoken about. And they fielded some great defenses and whatnot. So Thomas played cornerback. I thought he was safety, but cornerback. Let me see, my man Johnny Robinson, he was a safety and whatnot. And you look at his stuff. And see, that's what I'm talking about when it comes to the Hall of Fame, is because when we talk about the Hall of Fame, we need to be talking about guys. I say, what other safeties did what he did when he's in his prime? And when I talk about him in their prime, when they're in their prime, not only that, at the time them guys played, the NFL, if you go back to 69 and whatnot, was 69 or 70. I think we want to say 69 when the NFL was 50 years old and everything. I said, what are the safeties you're going to have to compare to him? How do you have these guys and mix them in with Ronnie Lotz and Troy Polamalu and all these other guys from the 70s, guys from the 80s, guys from the 90s, guys from the 2000s and whatnot? It's like it's not fair. And that's why I think these guys get a short end of the stick when it comes to that and whatnot. And see, that's what I'm here to try to clear some of that stuff up when we talk about these particular players. Some of these guys are gone. Buck Buchanan's gone. Who else is gone? Buck Buchanan, Curley Culp. Curley Culp is another one. When we talk about that of Curley Culp, I'm like, he's the reason why you have that of guys like that played and did that stuff when it comes back down to that of Joe Green and them guys sitting there playing that nose guard position, or like Joe Klecko and a lot of them other guys. And even down to guys like coming up in modern times when you're talking about Aaron Donald, right? So their defense needs to get a lot more respect on their name than what they've actually gotten and whatnot. And that's and that is something that needs to be spoken about when you're talking about the history of this league. And that's where the problem comes in when these guys take 30, 40 years to become Hall of Famers when they were the shit in their prime. These guys, all of these guys, 4 or 5 Pro Bowls easily that they had. They all made, all of them at one time or another was all pro first team. And and maybe not a first team Hall of Fame or whatever like that, but like second and third for sure, based upon the people that they played against back during that time and whatnot. So when we speak about that, these guys need to be mentioned in the same breath, especially that defense, because that's their mainstay. Because they only have one guy that's a Hall of Famer that is on offense, and that is Lynn Dawson. Going back to that of Otis Taylor, the only reason why Otis Taylor probably is not in the Hall of Fame is based on the fact that he only had, I think, 2,000 yard receiving years and whatnot that he had. If we go and look at his numbers, he led the league one year at 71 and 1297 in that his second year in the league and whatnot. But if you look at some of his highlights, I mean, this guy was off the chain. I mean, he was, to me, it sounds crazy, but I'm like, yeah, he was. If you look here, sure, with him right here, look at that leaping ability and whatnot. And I make fun of it. It's Tom Jackson, Steve Atwater, and whatnot. But if you look at this, what he does here, let's go back. Look at leap up, and he was 6'3", 215. He was a big man playing that position. A lot of your linebackers back during that time played at 6'2", 220 pounds and whatnot. And you have to look at that. So he did great things. He just because Hank Stram and the Cheifs, they were a running team at that particular time. So when you talk about the numbers that he put up, they don't quite come up with some of the guys in that era. And even though he probably still should be in the Hall of Fame, but like I said, if I'm not mistaken, he caught dementia like around 1990, if I'm not mistaken. So my thing of it is like you want these guys to be able to appreciate what they've done, and that has been awarded. But it's not awarded because you want to try to start. Well, you can't put him and then say, well, with somebody like Marvin Harrison. That's not fair to him, and that's not fair to him with Marvin Harrison. That's not fair to Marvin Harrison because those guys back during that time, they got the shit beat out of them as wide receivers. It was no joke. It was no joke at all. So somebody like Otis Taylor definitely needs to get his props, and we're going to give it to him here and whatnot. When we go in and talk about him and stuff like that, and it passing. The great Bud Grant passed away today, yesterday or either today, I believe, and he just did something that recently and whatnot. He was just photographed recently, and that of Otis Taylor passed away, and he had been in the living facility for quite some time. So yeah, man, like I said, man, when you start talking about some of these guys here, man, this guy, look at him. I mean, this is a big man. This is a big man playing that position, and he's playing it like he's 175 pounds at wide receiver. And he kind of reminds me of that of a T.O. and whatnot, or T.O. reminds me of him, so to speak. So yeah, so these guys, so the Chiefs organization and whatnot, and what they're doing now with Patrick Mahomes and a lot of these other guys and whatnot, and Kelsey and whatnot, he was a force to be reckoned with as that of a football player, as a wide receiver in this particular league and whatnot. And these guys' defense was top dog for about a 5 or 6 year period and whatnot. And not a lot is really spoken about with these guys. And like I like to say, man, hey, man, like I said, there is no GOAT, there's no greatest of all time as long as time is still going on. And also, numbers don't lie, get emotional. People do. These guys need to be recognized, especially that defense, need to be recognized for what they have done in in the annals of the pro football history. You guys, like I said, subscribe to the page, and we'll talk with you later.